Awesome. All right, now welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to a guide to holding space with compassion. Um, so thank you for being here. And if you're watching the replay, thanks for watching. You might want to grab a notebook. We're going to cover a lot of things, but again, in school, we're going to have the slides. So you're going to get a lot of information. It's going to feel like a fire hose coming at you, but it's going to be recorded. And you'll also have the slides. So one thing I want to do first, I'm going to stop share and get out of here, is show what it looks like in school for those who are watching the replay or have not gone into school, or just kind of like, what is school? Like, what are you talking about? So right here, this is school. This is our lovely community. We are actually #1 searched for the word grief and #2 in death and dying. And we are ranked number 16 on relationships, which is wild as far as like things go. So if you go to school, the community is here where you can talk, you can like, you can do all the things. And if you interact with everyone, you get put on the leaderboard. And the leaderboard is bragging rights. I'm still working on things to like give you as far as the different levels go. Shout out to Jennifer and Rachel and Fania, who are 1, 2, and 3 of all time in the 30 days. But shout out to Sean here, who's like rising up the ranks here in the past 7 days. Like, go on. I see you. But most importantly, this is a place where we can talk openly about death, dying, and grief. This is a community where it is safe to talk about that. It is safe to share. It is safe to say cuss words. In fact, cursing is highly recommended and suggested and encouraged. And if you don't like that, you can. All right. Let me see here. Okay. All right. So one thing that a community needs is more people. So if you have friends or family or anyone that who would benefit from being in our school community, please invite them. So we're going to cover a lot in this workshop. We're going to cover what a death doula is, the different types of grief there is to recognize, and then how to hold space. Okay. But first, who is Death Doula Beth? Death Doula Beth, again, likes to talk about herself in third person. I do find humor in a lot of things in life. And with a topic this heavy, I find that it's really important to do that. But this isn't something that I woke up one day and was like, hey, I want to be a death doula. Back in 2015, I was sitting with my partner's loved one who was actively dying, and honestly, it traumatized me. And so I made it my mission to figure out what I saw, what I experienced, get over the trauma that I experienced through this dying process, and discovered what death doulas do in the world. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll want to be that someday. So I went and I got my Reiki level 3 Usui practitioner certification. I got certified in the Nushu group modality. Some of you, if you come to the grief lounges, that's the modality. I'm a meditation teacher, and I believe that death positivity is life positivity. But I wanted to go and be certified as a death doula. I'm also end of life planner and elder care certified as well, because I love the education part of it. But I also, I just needed that. I just needed that to lean into becoming a death doula. And so I'd like to share fun facts about me right now. My fun fact is Foxy. Foxy is 13 years old, and she has my whole entire heart. She has about 20 different nicknames, Foxy Dudes, Foxy Doodle Dandy, um, Tinker Toes, Tinker Butts. If you have pets, you know. If you know, you know. If you don't, then that's okay. Um, so that's a little bit about me and enough about that. So I would like to open it up for you guys to share a little bit about who you are, why you came to this workshop, or just a fun fact. So I'll put the sharing order in the chat. And Corey, why don't we start off with you?
I unmuted.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Uh, so I work with a lot of seniors who I kind of oversee as a volunteer group. They go out and they do conversations on aging with similar folks their own age, and death, end of life decisions are a big topic that they always want a little bit more information on. So it's one of the reasons I'm here, and I really want to help my parents help plan in a thoughtful, meaningful way that's not so scary to approach. Um, yeah, that's something about me. And I'm also a meditation teacher. Me and Beth, I think, went through it together. So yay.
Thanks for sharing, Corey.
Thank
Sean,
you.
would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Sean. Um, yeah, I don't know. I went on a tree bathing thing with Beth one time, and it's like I just kind of been keyed into the stuff that she does. And this, I'm really interested in like spiritual communities and communities where people do not just like weird things, but like um, we're doing things differently, and taking care of each other and making space for people to be human. And yeah, so I guess like this is just kind of like I want to learn and see and experience and see what this stuff is about. Because I think that's part of how the human race heals itself, right? Um, and that's an interest of mine, right? Being human. Um, yeah, and pets are cool. I don't have any pets right now, so it's nice to see other people's pets, vicariously enjoy them. That's all I have to share for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Tina, sorry for spelling your name incorrectly. Would you like to share?
Um, what are we sharing? Just why we're here. First off, I agree with everything that Sean said wholeheartedly. Yes, yes. Um, I think I'm just here for the community. I've never found it, like a grief community, so to speak. Um, I don't know. I have a lot of grief. I have some anticipatory grief. My parents are very elderly, and that's the theme of the past year, and what sort of is heavy on my heart, which it shouldn't be. But I sort of have a similar story like you, Beth. Just um, very traumatic experiences with watching people die. And because I had two kids, I never really dealt with my grief up until about 7 years ago. And then I became a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, and a breath work, and just kind of found some solace in that. And I really wish those things would have been more available to me when I experienced my own loss. I too am looking for spiritual communities where I just resonate with people Um, and yeah, I do work with people. I do Reiki too, and so I feel like, you know, meeting enough people and hearing everybody's experiences just provides you with more capabilities to, like this workshop, hold space for other people, and because my grief won't be the same as somebody else's, and so yeah, and I love everything that your community has to stand for. So it's beautiful. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you for sharing, Tina. Dave, would you like to go next?
I would like to, yes. Um, well, I want to start to face my own mortality since, and I have people in my life that currently that I really want to learn to hold a space for. And I have some ideas about it, and I have been trying to. And, I think I'm overall successful, but I think I could probably protect myself a little better and encourage people or let people somehow know that it's safe to talk to me, without being that I'm not going to judge. And it's difficult. So I just want to learn more about the whole thing. I have specific people in mind that I have the opportunity free space for, and I don't think I do it that well. I don't know. So I want to do that better. That, and I'm just curious about death and death related things.
Thanks, Dave. And Marcel, would you like to share?
Sure. Sure. Hi. Fun fact about me is I'm at work right now at my regular day job. So if I jump off, that would be why. I'm an HR consultant. For the last couple of years, though, I have been members of a meditation communities, notably David G. and Yogi Bryans. And I've always been fascinated by what comes next and being more spiritual. And I'm really finding the need to really be, I'm really drawn to learning more now about death and how to hold space for ourselves and for our families. My dad is just turned 89 last week, and he'd been in the hospital. He's got a lot of some medical things, and he's all stubborn as all get out and doesn't want to wear the oxygen tanks. And mom's trying to help, but she's not really strong enough because she's 84. They still live independently. And so my sister and I are struggling to how to best help them and support them. And then for me, I'm trying to like not freak out when mom calls with the call about what do I do next. So I'm really just trying to be around other people to who can make this be less scary and make it feel a little bit more comfortable, because I feel like in our society we've lost this part, right? We don't pay attention to this. We don't live in communities anymore where this is a part of our natural family evolution. We don't do this. And so that's what I'm hoping. That's why I've been joining your community, kind of trying to get more of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. And we won't tell anyone you're at work. And Dana, I know you joined us late, but would you like to share who you are, what brought you here? Maybe a fun fact. Maybe Dana's at work too. And another fun fact, the funeral industry took hold in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Because of the war, they wanted to bring the soldiers back home in a recognizable state. So the funeral home and the funeral industry really took hold of the American families, which caused the divorce between us and experiencing death and dying in a way that was meaningful. So that's your fun fact that you can spew out in the world wherever that comes up. Okay, so let's get back to it, right? What the fuck is a death doula? First, we have to understand what a doula is. So the root of it, doula, is a non-medical professional who helps provide guidance for service of others who support other people through a significant health-related experience. So you've probably heard of a birthing doula. They're more mainstream. Yeah. But also non-reproductive, such as dying. Another thing a doula does is to provide support to the client's partner, family, and friends. And this is from Wikipedia. They had the closest definition to doula that was perfect that I could find. So, and I fact checked it with Wikipedia. But another fun fact, since we're on the fun fact train, the ancient Greek meaning of doula is female slave. You don't have to be a female or identify as she, her in order to become a doula. You can be a doula if you're he, they, them, it, whatever pronoun you want to go by. Okay. And real quick, with a death doula, what we are is a non-medical guide who helps individuals and families through end of life. We provide emotional, spiritual, and practical support. And we're not just for the dying, we're for the caregivers as well. For those who are grieving, I often find myself filling the gaps in between hospice visits and funeral home conversations and attorneys and getting things in order. And we usually have education, but you don't necessarily need to have education. You don't need to be certified or anything like that. It's sort of like a tattoo artist. A tattoo artist goes under a mentorship or apprenticeship program, and then they're out there doing the death doula work. So you really want to look at who you hire on as a death doula, if that's a route that you go. Just because not all death doulas are the same, we're not built the same. Some of us are specialized in different arenas and different ways and practices. So say you're more into like the physical things rather than woo-woo things, rather than, so you can find one that speaks your quote unquote language. The role of a death doula specifically is holding space for conversations about death like we're doing here, educating on like end-of-life options, legacy work, rituals, end-of-life planning, Swedish cleanouts, which are when you clean out your house early before the actual death happens. So, like gifting things to different people. It's really taking storm by right now, coming across into America. I hear a lot now of Swedish cleanouts, so awesome. Emotional and spiritual support for the families, grief support before, during, and after a death, rituals before, during, and after a death, and so much more. Again, you're going to find that we specialize in certain areas, different topics, different expertise levels, that sort of thing. I'm more educating and supporting and that sort of thing. So if you're asking yourself how to become a death doula or how can I become a death doula, we should talk. I do have spaces for 2 one-on-one sessions personally, but I also have a group program coming out soon, and you could become a death doula within 4 to 5 weeks. Something beautiful to add to your resume. You can either message me or Veronica, which is my admin on school, or you can send me an email at deathdoulabeth.com. Okay, so let's get into like the meat and potatoes of why we're all here. Welcome to Grief 101. In order to hold space for someone who is struggling with grief or a struggling period, we have to know what we look for. Like we have to know what to look out for, what to see, and how to identify it. Because sometimes identifying it for the person actually helps with the grief process. And so, what is grief? We're going to start with the basics. Grief is more than just sadness. It is an emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual reaction to any sort of loss. So it doesn't necessarily have to be with the loss of a person, like a death of a person. It's any sort of loss. Know that there's no right way to grieve. And this can be cumulative and resurface unexpectedly. There is no clear line, right? So Merriam-Webster and Google define it as the normal response to a major loss, such as a death of a loved one. Okay. So, question for you. How many different types of grief do you think there are? go ahead and type it into the chat and see if we can guess. You think that there's more than two? More than five? Yes. More than 10? Probably millions. How many different kinds of relationships? 6. Well, there are hundreds. They often overlap and they're called by different names, but we are going to go over 16 of the major ones that we commonly see. Okay. Now, before I move forward, I always, 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 always want to provide this. If you are in crisis, call or text 988. Okay. So let's get started. And this will just be really brief. We're just going to hit on this, pretty briefly. One, normal grief, which is the normal response to loss, and you experience it in waves over time. There's no right way to grieve, and it varies by individual. And each loss is a different track all its own. If you've had multiple losses, you will know. Number 2, anticipatory grief. I heard someone mention it earlier, occurs before a loss happens, such as when a loved one is terminally ill or when you see inevitable change coming. I often see this with cancer patients or people on hospice. Complicated grief, which is also known as prolonged grief disorder. Now, this is the type of grief that lingers and interferes with your daily life. It can also be considered depression. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. We're not going to diagnose anyone. But this looks very similar to depression. Okay. But it makes it really hard to move forward. Disenfranchised grief is a loss that is not socially recognized or validated. Typically, that's our people who are experiencing miscarriage, loss of an ex-partner, a death of a pet, something that we don't typically, recognize, whether it's like, it's like a lost loss. Ambiguous grief is a loss that is unclear or lacks the closure. When those missing people, like the true crime podcasts where they're like, we didn't find the person. And, those families are experiencing those ambiguous griefs. If someone has dementia, when a relationship ends without a clear resolution, like they just completely ghost you. And this is why ghosting really hurts in relationships. We have cumulative grief, which is multiple losses that can happen in a short amount of time, making it really hard to process each one fully. Then we have collective grief, which is shared by a community or society, like the LA fires that we just had, or the hurricanes victims, or a global event, or what's happening now. Yeah. Oh, and then we have secondary grief, which is a ripple effect from a primary loss. So that's like you lose your partner and you lose that financial stability, or you have to shift your identity, becoming a single parent again, or becoming an empty nester. It could be the loss of a social role following the death or a major life change when you move, that sort of thing. It's like, oh my gosh, I just got through this loss and now there's another one. Then we have shadow grief, which is also the anniversary grief that that we hear often and what we experience. So like anniversaries, places, memories, like that sort of thing. It's like you hear a song or you smell a smell and it just brings you right back there. There's also masked grief, when grief manifests in ways that we don't seem directly connected, like you get physical symptoms like pains and aches. You get irritability, compulsive behaviors. Then you have delayed grief, when grief is postponed due to immediate survival needs, responsibilities, or emotional suppression. The interesting thing is I see a lot of single parents go through this because we're often in survival mode, trying to get to the next thing, or living in poverty. I hear a lot with my hospice when I volunteer with hospice, and they're experiencing grief from their 20s and they're in their 80s now, um, because they just didn't have the time and they were like, why is it still bothering me? So if you're experiencing this, your grief is valid. Then we have the traumatic grief, which is a sudden, violent, deeply distressing circumstance. This is the big T. If you know, you know, the big T, a trauma. Then you have the inhibited grief. When grief is suppressed due to personal, cultural, or societal pressures, like we don't talk about that. We sweep that under the rug. We're not supposed to talk about that. Then we have vicarious grief, also known as empathetic grief, which is grieving for someone else's loss, even if it doesn't directly affect you. Um, so first aid responders often have that. You'll see caregivers, death doulas, empathetic individuals. If you're like, oh, my heart, like it breaks my heart to see that. I can't see that. That's what you're experiencing, is that vicarious grief. I live vicariously through you. Yeah, that also means that you can also go the other way too. So then we have existential grief, which is related to the awareness of our mortality when we get older, or the impermanence of life itself. And the quote that I always like to quote is, there's only two things that are solid in this world, and it's change and death, and taxes if you choose to pay them. So maybe three. And then the last one I wanted to bring up here is spiritual grief. So if you've been spiritual your whole life, and then you lose faith in it, or you change beliefs, or you're questioning your foundations, especially after a loss, that can kind of kick up that spiritual grief. Now they do overlap, and you can see how one would affect the other and how they can all be all true all at one time. But sometimes, again, it's nice to just have that there so that we can name exactly what we're feeling, because there's something healing about that. And so, also, again, just a reminder, if you are in crisis, please text or call 988. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. And I thought that this might be a good time and I'll just use the same sharing circle. If you would like to share, go ahead and share, like if something sparks something up within you, or you can always say pass. So, Corey, would you like to share anything that came up for you during the grief listings?
Uh, I think I resonated with the sort of delayed grief. Just from hearing some of my family members right now, we attended my uncle's funeral right after the day after Christmas. Uh, and yeah, it was just like my son sort of sharing with me, like, he's like, I think I'm just now processing things. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. There's not really a specific time. There's no timeline that like you have to feel one way or another. But yeah, it's what's kind of there right now. Thank
Thank you for sharing, Corey. I'm holding your family in my heart.
you.
Sean, would you like to share?
It's just really interesting what learning things you don't know. And I really like the delineation of the different types, because it helps to put handles on the different ways that a person may feel or experience loss. So I think that's really useful. That's all I have to.
Thanks for sharing, Sean. Tina, would you like to share?
Um, sorry, I'm on my phone. Um, I just resonated with a lot of the different ones that you sort of touch base on, but too many. um, yeah. I think, yeah, I don't know. A lot of my grief maybe was delayed, like you said. Parents who lose, or yeah, moms or dads who lose their significant other and just have to like, you know, step into the role, sort of mask their grief, or we have to go on with daily life. So I feel like, um, yeah, a lot of these other griefs would come up. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm not myself today, sorry, guys. And I just got sort of like hit by a cold this afternoon. It's just taking me off my feet, but I really wanted to be here. Yeah, I don't know. I really appreciated you like labeling them, and I feel like there is healing in labeling some of your grief. Like if you can resonate with some of those different things. Um, I especially really like the vicarious grief because when my partner first passed, I made it about everybody else's grief and not my own. And um, I feel like that one really resonated with me. So yeah, I liked I liked all your definitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you for sharing. Dave, would you like to share? Nope, you gotta unmute.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Repeated grief and the delayed grief seem to me like they might, I'm thinking of a specific person I know, and certainly there's delayed grief there, and it's delayed. I know because I've heard the person say they just don't have the bandwidth for this right now. They have to worry about their kids, this, that, and it's like I want to help somehow, but I don't know if I can, and it's like, and of course I've referred her to you, but you know, until she's ready to do something, I guess, so I want to hold space for that person. But also what appealed to me is the existential grief. I had mentioned this before. It's like I'm grieving my youth. I mean, there's only one other guy in here, and I don't know if it's a guy thing, but I used to be able to say, I'm going to go change that muffler, and I'd go out and change the muffler. I'm going to go out and mow the yard. I'd go mow the yard, and there was sort of as a man, there was sort of I can do, I am physically fit, I am capable, and there was sort of you know, there's a great youth about that, and that's gone. Now it's kind of like I'm going to sit here and think about it for a while, So I am kind of grieving that youth as I get older. My health is like not really so great. So yeah, there is that. I need to grieve also. So yeah, existential. So yeah, those are the ones that stuck out to me. I imagine as I look over this afterwards, other ones will stick out to me also. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Dave. And Dana, are you able to share? I think Dana might be at work or unable to share. Okay. So yeah, grief is multi-layered. Grief is one of those things that we all experience. Sort of like there's big T, little t, big G, little g. And, I share those in hopes that naming the different types of grief that we can find and that we can name helps with allowing that space to heal. Okay. 'Cause sometimes, like I heard someone share, um, sometimes naming it is the pathway to healing it, just to be seen and acknowledged. And that's the most healing part. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So we're going to talk about some myths and truths when it comes to grief. Um, First myth is grief follows stages in order, and if, it sure doesn't. Grief is nonlinear and it's unique to each person. Not only that, it's unique to each loss that we experience. The depth of connection that we have determines how deep the loss is and the depth of how fully we feel that grief. And, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also scary as fuck. Next myth, you should move on after a certain amount of time. And again, grief isn't something that we just don't get over. It's something that we integrate. And I just had a conversation today about, the person asked me, how do I get to a place like I was before after I lost my dad? How do I get to who I was before? And I said, you just don't. You can't. There is no going back. When you lose someone, you can't just go back and move on. This person was very important to you, and it's important to acknowledge that loss, and life is not going to be the same. And it's hard. And so you can't just move on. So anyone that said that to you, tell them to fuck off. Okay? Beth told you. Beth told you. Myth number 3, keeping busy will help you heal. I think this is like a boomer thing, the boomer generation. But avoidance of feeling those feelings is going to delay your healing. You got to feel it to heal it. You got to go through it in order to, I don't know what rhymes with that, but you got to, you get to the drift. So this all leaves us with the question, how do we hold space? Like, what is holding space? How do we support a grieving loved one and also yourself through this process? Because holding space is a skill that we can all learn. I firmly believe it. Okay. So what the fuck is holding space? Because a lot of spiritual people are going to be like, I'm just holding space for you. And, just holding I'm just holding you in this space. Like, what does that even mean? What the fuck does it even mean? So I'm here to help define what holding space is. I'm very cerebral, brainy, like I like to think and like educate in that sort of space. So let's break it down. Holding space is having a safe, non-judgmental presence. So that means that someone can tell you anything and everything, and you'd be like, okay, tell me more. Letting someone fully express their grief without fixing it. And grief can be replaced with any sort of emotion, any sort of feeling, any sort of anything. And it's just allowing someone to be in whatever arena that they're in. So, and it's more about allowing the silence than filling it in with words, allowing silence and deep listening. You often hear people say, like, what I hear you say is insert what they just said. Tell me more about that. It seems like you would like to share more. I'm here to listen. And one thing I really like to bring up, especially when it comes to holding space, is I want you to think of 2 times in your life. First time, I want you to think about the time where you just felt like this person was not listening to me. They weren't making eye contact. They were interrupting. They always had something to say. They always had advice. Well, you should be better by now. Like unhelpful things. Okay. I feel like we've all had that experience. Yeah. And conversely, I want you to think of a time where you were really listened to, whether it was when you were a child or an adult. Maybe it's to yourself, where you really fully felt like someone was listening to you, taking everything that you were saying in, allowing you to share who you are, allowing you to express whatever it was. And they were just fully there and fully listening. And that feels so much better. So how do we can that and replicate it so that we can do it again and again and again? And it's all about how do we show up. So I'll forewarn you, once you know this, you're never going to not know it. And it's going to bug you when people don't do this. I will I will, or or like when you do it, you're like, oh man, I didn't hold space like in the way that I was, in a way. But um, so these are some best practices. Say less and listen more. So we're going to avoid saying things like they're in a better place or basically anything. When someone is showing up their emotions, allowing their emotions to be seen, we don't want to interrupt their process. So it's often, there was a statistic out there and I forget where it is and don't quote me on it, but when you're holding space for someone and listening and being in that place, it's like 90% listening, 10% talking. We're going to 90% listen and 10% talk. And most of it's going to be like, I don't like, tell me more. Like those open-ended questions, open-ended statements to get them to continue talking. Check in regularly with them. When we experience a loss, there's a flutter and a flurry of people coming to visit, people coming to check in, make meal trains, people like, hey, I'm just thinking of you. And then that slowly starts to die down and settle. And then that person is left all alone. That person is feeling abandoned and alone and that no one else is there. So regular check-ins after that dust is settled, usually it's a month's time, depending on, different factors. Sometimes it's two, but checking in and just being like, hey, I thought of you. Could you, do you want to go out for coffee or can I bring coffee to you or whatever? But even months after, it's still so fresh. And unless you've gone through that sort of depth of a loss and grief, you don't really know. So even if they cross your mind, use that as an inkling. And I'll get woo-woo here. If they're crossing your mind, they're probably thinking of you and wanting you to reach out to them. Yeah, it's that phenomenon of like, if you're thinking of that person and they call your phone, like, oh, like, and that's kind of like spirit working, God, source, universe, all those things. Offering very specific support. When someone is experiencing grief, their mind is like butter, like it's all melted. They can't think straight. Don't make me make another decision. Please don't make me make another decision. For the love of all things fucking good, do not make me make another decision. And their answer is going to be, I don't need anything. If you ask the question, let me know if you need anything. I don't need anything. Thanks, but no. Unless you say something along the lines of, I can bring you dinner on Thursday or Friday. Which one works for you? Don't don't give him any options to say no. Like, I will drop off dinner for you. I will come by with coffee. Um, well, not true in every case, but for the most part, like people are looking for, because they're going to feel bad. Receiving help is really hard, but offering help is often more easier. That's a whole nother workshop, is giving and receiving. We often find ourselves showing up and wanting to give and wanting to, and that's so easy. However, receiving is like, ooh. And, that's sometimes what happens at end of life with um, with, you know, our older parents or older generation. Receiving help is like, no, I'm not going to ask for help, even though they need the help. And respect their grief process. There's no shoulds or oughts or timelines. Like you should be okay by now. Like I don't feel like I have to say that with this group here, but sometimes like I've heard well-meaning people say, well, they should be done by now with their grief process. They should be happier. Why don't they do this? Listen, like it's okay to say that to other people, but it's not okay to say that to the person who's grieving. If you're really concerned about someone, their mental health, their well-being, don't say, unless it's those things, it's best not to say anything at all from my perspective and from what I've experienced, Okay. All of that boils down to a very simple let them feel. I did have let them cry, but the let them feel whatever the feeling is, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's, oh, I just don't want to do anything. Like, let it be. Let them feel whatever they want to feel. We're not going to rush to fix and soothe them. We're just going to let them feel their emotions naturally, because grief needs expression. To move out, we got to feel it. We got to feel it to heal it. And if you want to be a safe person for this person, to create that safe space, you have to allow that space to exist, right? To allow those feelings to happen. And one of the biggest indicators of that safety is the tissue. So the tissue analogy is, if you're crying and someone hands you a tissue, they are essentially saying, stop that crying. It's making me uncomfortable. It's giving that signal, even though they're not saying it. And so we can make sure the tissues are available and that they're in plain sight, but let them pick up the tissue. Let them advocate for their own needs. Let them wipe the snot off their nose. It's not our job. It's not our noses. You know, it's their willingness to do that. And a lot of people are going to give me hate for that. And, you know, I'm here for it. You know, but the thing is, when we allow someone the ability to cry and not be interrupted and not given the signal of you're too much, close that down, we allow them to heal. Like we're in that process of allowing them to heal. So the biggest hurdle is sitting with our own discomfort. Why is this making us this uncomfortable? What about this watching someone else's discomfort is making me uncomfortable? I know I want to help and interject, but this person can advocate for their own needs. So why do I feel like I need to intercept? Do I think I know better than what they need in this moment? And so it takes a lot of refrain, because it's rude, according to our society, to not hand someone a tissue or not say, oh, they're there, it's okay, or give them a hug and tell them it's going to get better. Sometimes, oftentimes, it's not going to get better. And there's nothing that anyone can say or do that's going to make grief feel better. That's the truth of it. And sometimes if we don't have anything to say, or you want to say something, I just don't have any words. I wish there was something that I could say right now, but there's just no words. It sucks. I'm here though. I'm sitting here next to you. You're not too much. And I'm here. That's all we really want. To be seen, to be heard, to be witnessed, not to be felt like we were too much, not to feel like we're imposing on someone. And so this means that we have to do the inner work to get to that place where we can sit with that. Some questions that you can ask yourself. I'm big into journaling. So questions to ask yourself, which I don't have written here. But why am I feeling uncomfortable? And what would happen if I just allowed the other person to have their experience, to feel their own pain? Like, what would happen? And, you know, and go deep with that. So check yourself is the last one. And I borrowed Yogi Brian's snap technique because I think it's perfect. This isn't something that you can do in front of people, but it's something that you can do either in the bathroom or taking a step away. And it's shimmy now and pause. Shimming is good to release the endorphins inside the body, to release some of the tension that's in there. Now, meaning get it out right now when you're feeling it, and pause. There's so much beauty in just pausing and just allowing that space, allowing that pause. There's just beautiful things arise in that pause. We often feel like we need to fill up every single moment, every quietness, but allowing that quietness to bring up whatever needs to bring up, it's a beautiful thing. So, anything else here? No. So how do you show up for you? Now, these are just best practices. These are my ideas. If you have any new ones, or if you have ones that work for you, please do share them. Because I believe sharing in community is how we learn best. I'm not the end all be all. I will say that over and over and over again. I learn something new every single day. And so this is what has helped me in the past and currently helps me. And I wanted to share it with you. Maybe it'll help you, maybe not, maybe something else works. Please do share. So setting boundaries. If you're caught off guard and you're not in a place where you can hold space for someone, set that boundary. I don't have the time now, but we can talk about it at this time instead. You do not have to show up at the drop of a hat. If it's not a good time, let the call go to voicemail and just call them back when it's when it's convenient for you, or you can offer them a different time. It's really important that you set those boundaries. That I set those boundaries too. Pause before responding. Oftentimes it feels like a crisis. When someone is going through a really, really difficult emotion, it just, we want to be there and we want to say yes to, I'll show up for you tomorrow. I'll show up for you this next week. I'll say yes to things. And I've seen a lot of people get into pickles because they say yes to a lot of things because they didn't pause before responding. So it's really important that we stay grounded and centered in our response to whoever we show up to, because chances are the person across from us, we really care a lot and we have big hearts. If you're watching this, chances are you have a beautiful, beautiful heart that cares so deeply about people and you want to show up. And it's important that you show up for you too, because you're, if not more important than that person. Practicing self-care rituals for yourself. So that could be Reiki, massage, breaking plates, whatever works. I wish they had rage rooms still open. They closed the rage room where I live. I don't know why. It was the best experience I've ever had. So if you have a rage room near you, go there. It releases some of that pent-up energy. Anyway, find your own support system because grief can be contagious in unexpected ways. Our grief can be activated in a multitude of different ways. And protect your peace. So with this, I want to offer 2 different exercises that have been really, really helpful for me when it comes to that sort of thing. And you have an axe throwing place in Portland? Yeah. Yeah, we have that here too. It really helps. It really helps to get physical and just share. Like, so. All right, so take a seat and lie down. Take a seat or lie down. And just get really comfy if you're able to. And we're going to envision ourselves in a impenetrable bubble. And this is something that you can do prior to going to see a friend or go hold space. This is something that you can do during the talking. This is something that you can do first thing in the morning or when you go to sleep or whenever you think of it. Just allow your eyes to close and just feel where you are, noticing where you're sitting, noticing the temperature in the room, the weight of your feet on the ground or underneath you or wherever it is. Noticing any sounds in the room, if there's any smells, just noticing where you are. And as you're noticing, gentle inhale and exhale. The natural breath, your intuitive breath. Inhaling and exhaling, noticing where you are. And just witness your thoughts like they're waves of the ocean coming in and rolling out. And just witnessing them, nothing to do with them, nothing to do, nowhere to be, but just witness. And as you witness, you begin to notice that surrounding you is a clear bubble. This clear bubble allows you to see out and people to see in, but nobody can get across. Nothing can come in. Nothing can get to you. It's impenetrable. The only thing that you allow in is love, peace, and light. It's the only thing that you're allowing in. Love, peace, and light. Nothing else can come through. Impenetrable. Test it out. And if it pops, that's okay. It is impenetrable. Nothing can come in, but you can see out. And this bubble stays around you every day, for every moment of each day. Nice deep inhale. Exhale, side out. Beautiful. Okay. Sometimes it takes some practice to get that bubble to stay so it's not popping. For me, it popped so many times. However, you can make it, just keep practicing, going at it over and over again and practicing. And it only takes 2 minutes. The next one you can do at any time. Say you're getting pissed off because the person across from you is, doing this or that. You can do this for any situation, anytime. This is to help get you centered and to get you back to a place of calm. So I learned this from Ali Bogard. And you take your fingers, you put them together. Your finger, your middle finger, your thumb. Okay. You don't have to do this when you're in front of people, but you have your finger and forefinger. And you imagine a line going from this point all the way up your finger, down your hand, down your arm, up your forearm, up your shoulder, down your spine, all the way to your sit bone. And if it breaks, start over. Start from that point, bringing it all. And you can just have your hand sitting on your lap. And just imagine that line going from that point all the way to your sit bone, connecting it all the way through. And that is how to stay focused on internal so that we're not being swept away by what this person is experiencing. So I know we have 1 minute left. I'm going to stop the recording at 7:00 p.m. on the dot. And if you have to leave, go right ahead. But if you would like to stay and ask any questions or have any comments, I invite you to stay. I'll keep it open for about 5 more minutes for questions or comments. So thank you so much for joining me tonight and for your time. And if you're rewatching this replay, thanks for watching.